I met my realtor wife when she gave me the tour of my future home. It's a beautiful, unique mansion. I'm an architect, but the design of my house still amazes me as much as it did the first time I saw it. It's older, but you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at it. It's futuristic and stands out on a giant hill all by itself. At the time, my future wife looked just as dazzling as the house. I asked her out that very night and took her to the nicest place in the city. On the way, we saw a billboard with her face on it. She was the star realtor of Memphis Area Realty, and she made it her personal goal to live with me in the house on the hill. As an architect, I got to travel all over the US to share my ideas and designs with upper-class, business-driven people. I was never gone for more than 3 days. A lot of my work could be done remotely, but traveling was inevitable sometimes. So, our story really begins when my wife volunteered to watch her aunt's house for 7 days. I had to leave for a trip before this, so we were apart for 10 days. It was the longest we ever went without seeing each other. Before she got to her aunt's house, she texted me often and called each evening to talk and say goodnight. On the first day she spent there, she was pretty quiet. She finally sent me a selfie with a campfire in the background and another man. There was also a teenager I didn't recognize. I asked who they were, and she texted me to explain that they lived on the same property as her aunt, just about 300 yards away in a different house. They knew her aunt, but not enough for her aunt to have them watch her house. My wife told me the man in the picture had a wife, but she went to bed early. I believed her and just asked her to be careful. I told her I didn't want anyone in her aunt's house with her for safety's sake. She agreed with me. The next 2 days she spoke to me less, even though she knew I was back home by myself. She said it was because she was busy taking care of her aunt's chickens. The next 3 days she only called me for about an hour on each day. The rest of the time she said she had a few properties to show that were close to her aunt's house. She showed me some of her aunt's chickens, but video calling just made me wish I was there with her. Her aunt lived 2.5 hours from us, and I had to meet with a few clients in the opposite direction. On the 8th day she only texted me good night and told me she got sucked into a book all day as an excuse for not speaking to me. On the 9th night she sent me a selfie of her in bed. I honestly wondered if the man next door was laying beside her just out of sight. On the 10th night she video called me around 9. She looked sad and sounded unsure of everything. It was extremely different compared to how my wife normally acted. Her excuse was that she fell off the porch steps and landed face first in the dirt. I was about to sympathize with her, but she quickly and loudly said she'd be home tomorrow and hung up. I tried calling her back over and over, but she didn't answer. I was so mad that I didn't try to call her the next day, even though I was worried and wanted to know if she was near home. When she walked in, I was relieved and swooped in for a hug. She was stiff and hesitant to let me caress her. I immediately asked her what was going on and what happened, but she played dumb and said there was nothing to report. I asked if she was as relieved to see me as I was to see her, and she only weakly said yes. We had sex, but it was just wrong. Before I could quiz her more, her aunt called my phone. It was odd that she wouldn't contact my wife directly, so I said it was someone from work and left the room to answer it. She said she came home to find AP with my wife in her home. She didn't know AP well at all, even though he was her neighbor, so it was very unusual to find him there without her permission. They looked spooked when she walked in, so she decided to review her driveway camera footage. I held my breath as she told me AP went to her house several times to see my wife. She couldn't see what they did in her house, but whenever they went outside, the audio was recorded. My wife trash-talked me to AP and said he was better company. I asked her if AP was married, and she said no, so my wife lied from day 2. Her aunt told me that on the last 2 nights she stayed there, AP came over around 10 p.m. and didn't leave the house until the next morning. I felt like my world was ending. I remembered the picture she sent me, and knew for certain that AP was in the house at that time. She apologized and said she never thought my wife was capable of cheating or lying like this. My wife came into the room and asked me what was going on. I lost it. I started screaming what her aunt just told me, and she started sweating. She said whatever AP told her wasn't true, but I told her that cameras don't lie. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out, and I demanded to know why. I was so mad. I was shaking. She was holding her phone for some reason, so I grabbed it and snapped it in half. She screamed at me for that and called me a spaz, which made me lose it even more. I reminded her that I was freaking out because I just found out she spent nights with another man behind my back. I asked if they had sex, and she just told me I wouldn't want to know. I told her to get out of my house. It was then that her eyes bugged out of her head. It was like she didn't realize I was going to break up with her for this. She suddenly pleaded with me, saying she didn't mean anything by it and just wanted someone to hang out with while she was there. I was only more infuriated and told her she could have invited me over. If she was that lonely, she didn't have to cheat on me. I could have driven the distance if it meant saving our marriage. She stammered and couldn't think of anything that would help excuse her from this poor decision and life-changing mistake. I told her once again to get out of my house. I wouldn't forgive this level of blatant betrayal. Without her phone, she walked to a gas station in tears to call her mom. She came to pick her up and get her stuff, but my soon-to-be ex refused to tell her what was going on. So I told her all about my wife's mistake. She begged me not to tell her mother, but I told her I was going to tell anyone and everyone what she did to me. Once she was at her mom's, I connected with my closest friends for support. In a short while, I became known as the city's newest and most desirable bachelor. She became known as the realtor that cheated on her respectable husband. Her billboard was graffitied and she was subsequently fired from Memphis area realty. OP, I can't believe your wife didn't respect you enough to let AP remain a stranger. She didn't have to interact with him at all, but she chose to and even lied about him being married. It was like she planned to do this by giving a lie so early into the trip. I am relieved that her aunt told you what she found out because it didn't seem like your wife had any intention of spilling the beans, even though it was obvious that her behavior changed and something was wrong. Just be grateful you didn't spend even more time with this woman. Karma took away the image she worked so hard to create. Since cheating on you, she's basically starting back from square one in life. I wish you the best and thank you for sharing this story. I'm sure you'll have no trouble at all continuing on your path to success and happiness. Now let's get into our second story for today. 12 years ago, I married my wife. She had her nursing degree and always seemed like an extremely kind and respectable woman. I was proud to go around bragging that I was married to the best woman in town. Since my parents were legends in the area, I felt almost like a celebrity. Success was easy for me since my father trained me in his craftsmanship. My wife and I often went to gatherings and parties, all dressed up and classy. I thought she deserved it, but I was wrong. I didn't know that 7 years after we were married, she met someone that would change our life forever. Shortly after we were married, she left the chaotic and unpredictable hospital employment to work a much more comfortable and sophisticated job. 2 elderly and wealthy people my father knew were looking for a trusted nurse to share their mansion with them for 1 week at a time, 2 weeks in a month. Although it was a small adjustment for us to live apart like this, I was extremely busy working on client projects, so the schedule suited us just fine. This happened, as I just told you, for the next 10 years. But in actuality, she stopped working this job completely after 5 years. One night, I was sitting at the dining room table with my wife of 12 years eating dinner. Earlier in the day, she helped me mark down which expenses she put her paycheck towards that week. I was feeling extremely grateful, happy, and pleased. I'm sure she was too, but maybe a part of that was because she was able to keep her affair from me for so many years. Suddenly, my phone rang. I excused myself to take the call like I always did if it was business-related. In the other room, I heard my father's worried voice. He asked me if I knew that my wife wasn't working for his elderly friends anymore. I said she still was, so he explained that he was having tea with them when they mentioned that she quit working for them 4 years ago. The room spun and I felt my body become weightless. I just asked my dad where my wife was getting money from. He didn't know the answer to that, and he was worried for me. In a daze, I turned to look into the dining room at my wife. She was chewing, but smiled a close-lipped smile at me. When my face didn't turn from extremely disturbed, she swallowed hard and asked me what was going on. I asked her where she'd been getting her money from all these years. Her fork dropped, and she slowly rose to her feet. She looked down, then back at me and said she knew this day would come. She told me she loved us both, so whatever needed to happen was fine. She made peace with it. I just asked who she loved, and she said me and another man's name I didn't know. She met AP at one of the social gatherings we went to. He was a truck driver who was only home for 2 weeks out of the month. After their relationship evolved over text, phone calls, and several dates I knew nothing about, he asked her to move in with him. Somehow he didn't know she was married to me. She quit her job and was there for him whenever he got home from driving. He didn't notice her using his money to pay our household bills, because he made and spent money without much thought. I was speechless. She added that she would just make up stories about the old people whenever I asked. A scream came out of my body. I felt like I was shape-shifting into an animal. Every part of me hurt, and no matter what thought I had, it tormented me. I told her to get out repeatedly. I was saying more than that, but I can't remember exactly what I said because my memory becomes a blur. She packed willingly and quickly, but she had the nerve to wish I wouldn't take it so hard. I was freaking out, completely devastated. I grabbed a paper bag and started breathing into it just so I wouldn't pass out. This was our entire life. I thought she was my diamond, something to be proud of, something strong and beautiful that I'd never lose. All the while, my father was on the phone. Hearing my despair, he called some of my friends, and they all agreed to meet at my house. When they got there, I literally fell into their arms, letting each of them hold me for several seconds. I needed their strength. My soon-to-be ex loaded her car alone, silently, until she drove away. I couldn't believe she was going so easily. My father, friends, and I all started talking about what to do next. I decided with their support that we needed to figure out who AP was and tell him she was living this double life. She certainly didn't deserve to have a backup home and spouse she could run to. We found him after some investigating. My wife's secret online account that led us to him was under her middle and maiden name. We messaged him, but he and I ended up speaking directly over the phone so I could answer all his questions. When he realized I knew everything about his girlfriend and had pictures of us living our lives together, he broke down. She broke 2 hearts. He swore he wouldn't allow her to have anything of his ever again. That same day, my wife called me sobbing. She asked me why I had to ruin her life. I couldn't believe her selfishness and inability to accept her wrongdoing. She got away with having 2 lovers for so long. I guess it was twice as heartbreaking to lose both at once. I told her she was the one that ruined our lives, and she was a liar that didn't deserve to be happy. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. Even though she continuously tried contacting me, she updated me continuously. At first she tried getting back her old job, but after the couple found out she lied and cheated, they called her untrustworthy. She resorted to a nursing job at the hospital again and rented a small, pathetic apartment. She was forced to work full-time as a nurse just to make ends meet, which she said was nearly impossible after mooching off 2 men for so long. With the new, demanding schedule, she hasn't had time to date anyone, and has asked me more than once to take her for old time's sake. I always ignore her. She already stole too much of my time. OP, I can't believe your wife cheated on you for so long. The fact that she was capable of lying and living a double life like that makes her an extremely difficult person to trust. Even if she changed her ways, she'd have a hard time getting anyone to trust her if they knew her history, which means she'll probably lie and avoid telling anyone what she's done. This was not your fault. No matter who her husband was, she most likely would have done the same thing. Since her schedule was the same as his, she saw the opportunity to be dishonest. I am relieved that your father discovered the truth and helped you, along with friends, to get through the devastating news. You have a second chance at true love. This isn't the end, but just the beginning. You already know what it takes to have a successful, long-lasting relationship on your part. Just keep your faith and refuse to give up in finding an honorable spouse. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey folks, it's Gary here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's story, OP found out his wife cheated on him after he came home and noticed what happened to be a shadow hiding behind his bed. At that moment, he knew it was his wife's affair partner. Then even crazier news developed that OP's wife got pregnant by the affair partner. Now her life will be a complete wreck after OP reached out to his lawyer and is planning on annulling their marriage, meaning she will get absolutely nothing from him. In today's second story, OP found out his girlfriend cheated on him because she claims her family didn't approve of him. Now let's get into today's stories. I met my wife 4 years ago and got blindsided by her blatant and unapologetic infidelity. Just like every relationship, we had highs and lows, but I never imagined that the lows were that low. We got married 2 years ago and things were blissful. We both worked in the same work industry, but at separate companies. I was a manager and she was just coming up, and it would not be acceptable to work together as per company rules. Because we worked at separate companies and were nearly an hour away, I never believed cheating would occur because things had been so good at home. I could be working for 12 hours and come home to dinner, sex, and all the things anyone would love to come home to after a long day. Not to say I didn't do the same, because I always did. One of the things I loved to do was to bring her her favorite flowers every week on my ride home. She gushed every time I came through the door with them, and more so when they opened up to display their full color. Nearly a year into the relationship, we began to argue, but it was nothing more than simple misunderstandings. Although I was concerned, I also attributed it to some of our money issues. She hadn't been making as much, and although I was the primary breadwinner, what I made didn't always afford us the luxuries we had loved to engage in months prior. I always told her things would get better, and they certainly did. I got a raise and so did she. However, the arguments didn't subside the way I had imagined they would. Fast forward to March 2020, and the pandemic put us both on our backs financially. I qualified for assistance and promptly took it to make sure we'd have the essentials. She, however, did not qualify and was understandably upset about it, and when some other companies outside of our industry were hiring, she went for it and got a job. I, at the time, was collecting close to what I was making pre-pandemic weekly, and we discussed it would not be advisable to go and look for a job that would essentially put me backward career-wise. This meant I would stay home and help out while she worked, and with both incomes we'd be just fine. Prior to her getting the job and during, I supported her by making sure she had her paperwork filled out. I got up early and helped her get her lunch. I sometimes showed up to her job to take her out to lunch and took care of most of the other duties around the house she wouldn't always have time for. Little did I know that her sudden happiness had nothing to do with just finding a job and getting back to a much more stable financial status. From what trickled truth she gave me, the affair started almost as soon as she got the job in May and continued until I went back to work in August, leaving the home unattended. In November, I became aware of the affair when I came home one day to grab something I forgot and found the door chained when I got home. When she finally came to the door, I found a bath drawn with candles lit and her wrapped in a towel. The chain door was very unusual and sent me into high suspicion because we lived in a secured building that needed a key fob or a code to enter. I began to look around and noticed a shadow behind the bed showing on a nearby mirror. I yelled out for him to stand up and face me, and for the first time I realized the guy that was cheating with my wife was someone I had met when I picked her up from work so many times. My wife formally introduced me to him, and at that very moment I felt sick to my stomach. He promptly left and I just sat there feeling stupid. I asked why, and her response was to get angry at me for finding out, and when pressed further told me she felt a connection. From there I knew I needed to get out and mistakenly never had an exit strategy. Due to COVID, my funds were severely depleted and moving out was not an option yet. So I had to brave it for the next 2 months before I would be able to move. It was by far the most numbing time frame I have ever dealt with. We slept in separate parts of the home and carried on like roommates. I wanted to be civil not for her but for my own peace of mind. That, however, was not to be, as I found out she had become pregnant as a result of the cheating, and I only tore the wound back open, and I really began to feel like things couldn't get any worse. She also continued to flaunt the relationship in front of me and made going to work agonizing, knowing what was likely going on when I was not home. What's even worse is when I moved out she refused to pay the rent, and I kept getting notices about it from the management company. In January I moved out and started to save money for a lawyer and sought therapy. I should note that she never believed I'd file, and I made sure not to let on that I would. It bought me plenty of time to consult a lawyer who went over all the details and originally wanted me to file for divorce but later decided that an annulment would be better. The lawyer also drafted letters to ensure I would not be on the hook for the lease and paperwork with the IRS to have our tax debt split. We filed at the end of May 1 year after when I believe the affair began. Since then it's come to light that she may have been involved with more than one affair partner, and when I say more than one I mean 3+ suspected. As of 1 week ago we had her served at work because it had also come to my attention that she had moved out of the apartment and surrendered the keys. I got an email from the management company. Now I wait as she has 35 days to respond before it goes into default and the decree is issued. I will update later as more news comes to light. Thanks for reading. Update. So it's been just over 3 months since my soon-to-be ex had been served back at the end of June. Her lack of response to being served only let me know she either didn't care or wanted it to be over just as I had. As I sit here typing, I was informed that she retained counsel and intends to fight the annulment. I was pretty shocked to find out after calling the courthouse that she had filed for this extension at some point at the end of August, which would have been nearly 4 weeks after the deadline given. My mind is in a whirlwind because I can't believe for a second that she actually wants to reconcile with me. At this point, because of the fact that she did give birth to the affair partner's child at the end of July, she may be looking for someone to raise her affair baby and not for a genuine connection with me. I really don't know for sure because I don't read minds, but the feeling that she may try to sue me for paternity enters my mind, and I won't lie and say I'm not worried about it. After months of therapy, I come to understand more than before how mentally abusive my marriage was, and I have no doubt that if she is the same person, she's tried almost anything to try and hold me hostage. The day she and her counsel speak with the judge is this Friday, and words of encouragement and advice would be greatly appreciated on how to deal with this news. Wow, OP, here are my thoughts on the situation. If you have evidence and it will not cause problems with the divorce or nomen proceeding, then get it out there because she will lie. Also contact her HR with the evidence when it's safe to do so. You might even be able to get evidence from the coworker if you let him know you're going to name him when you go to HR. Let him know that it'll be proven that he is the child's father, but if he helps you can leave him out of it, or if he helps you enough you can drop going to HR entirely. Yeah, it's dishonest and underhanded, but you owe this guy nothing. Get what you want and nuke the remains. There are 2 things you know for certain. 1, he will sell out your wife, and 2, this will end their affair and any other office affairs and let her family know that you are one of at least 4 other men that could be the father of her child. I wish you the best, OP, and hope your situation is able to work out. Now let's get into today's second story. First time poster here, so bear with me. I met my dream girl during the pandemic in 2020 by complete chance. Couldn't have gone better. We chatted all the time and got on perfectly and spent a few beautiful weeks together. Couldn't have asked for more. For me, it was the first person I had been involved with for a good few years. More on this later. So I became quickly invested in her, and she did with me too. During this time we grew very close and started to have deeper conversations. I found out she actually had a boyfriend when we started talking, but she quickly ended that as things had fizzled out between them. I should have taken this as a sign. Anyway, by the end of a few weeks I returned to the university to finish off my degree, and so did she. However, we were both well over 6 hours from each other. We agreed to stay in regular communication and would talk every day in order to see how we would go. We spoke every minute of every day as much as we could, growing closer and closer despite the distance. I made the journey down one time and we had the most lovely weekend. Couldn't have been better. However, I have a quirk or 2 in my past that I feel I should inform someone of if I ever get close. Better to be honest and upfront and all that. I have a one-time incident criminal record on a night out that I'm not proud of and got myself into a hole about. I did some major soul searching at that time and realized my life was on a downward spiral and I needed to sort it out. Long story short, I went from being at a dead end to studying online, gaining access to the university, and am now halfway through my master's, so I've made some progress. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Basically said, the girl's parents did not like that I had a past like that, even though I was about to graduate and progress on to the next level. After that, things started to become a bit distant. We still spoke each day, and she convinced me she was going to talk to her parents about it when she flew back to Canada for Christmas. Yes, she's Canadian. If only I had known this was a load of rubbish. I eventually called things off in January 2021, as chasing a girl for that long really starts to ruin your mental health. In my own words, at the time, I'm 1% of the guy I used to be when we first met. So we went our separate ways. Fast forward to April 2021. I get a message from her asking me how I'm doing and that she missed me, etc. Me being the soppy guy I am, obviously went along with it. She had actually moved back to Canada in January that year to finish her master's degree. So at this point she was still there. We chatted through all of the summer, did video calls every day and texted each day saying all sorts of lovely things to each other. She was reeling me back in very well and suggested multiple times she was moving back to the UK for me and her to start a relationship properly. Obviously this had me hooked. I thought things were going to start looking up. I was very excited. Things were strange sometimes over the course of the summer, but I put it down to her being a bit stressed as her family was giving her grief for moving back to the UK and she had a lot on her plate with it. I feel so stupid for ignoring my gut about the whole thing. She got back here in July and from that month till November it was absolutely perfect. We were great together and it worked so well, but then Discovery Day happened on November 6th, 2021. I had forgotten my laptop to do schoolwork, so she let me use hers while she was at work. I saw some things that looked funky to say the least. Emails with her ex's name, pictures from old holidays and folders with pictures on the laptop just on the screen plain to see. I did some digging and found some restaurant reservations from the first time we were talking. Then some emails regarding academic journals. They were both on the same course and living in the same city. I asked her about it and she said they were on placement together and that was it. Then I pressed more and more. She said they went to dinner a couple of times. Then I pressed more. She went to his house over a couple of months to watch sports with him and his friends. Then I pressed some more and she said he was walking her home from placement and she was inviting him inside. She slept with him on multiple occasions while talking to me. All of this info came out over a month and a bit. More information came too. She said she stayed at a cottage with her sister and mom when she was back home for a weekend. She saw him again with her family 2 weeks before she saw me again, had sex with him in the back of his car, and in her words said to make sure she didn't still have feelings for him before she saw me again. Honestly, since that day my head hasn't been right. I've been trying to struggle my way through it because she is convinced she made a terrible mistake because she knows I would be the best thing for her in every way. She basically feeds me all this stuff. Her reason for doing it? She didn't have approval from her family about me and thought I was too good for her, and she has low self-esteem, so she tends to self-destruct. She wants to reconcile and is apparently madly in love with me, and is now in severe depression because of what she has done to me. Her friend says she's never seen her like this over a guy before. Her parents and sister loved me when they met me, so they're very disappointed in her that she's done this to me. They didn't know in what capacity we were talking. She hid it. Everyone is hugely disgusted by what she's done and how she's played me for over a year. What do I do about this? I honestly don't think I could ever trust her again. Not properly. If I could, it'd take years of hard work and we don't live super close to each other at the moment. Half of me feels like I should consider trying to reconcile because maybe she did just make stupid choices. I don't believe anything is really ever a mistake though, and perhaps under all of that exterior there's a good person. The other half of me feels like I should just cut my losses, chalk it up on the scoreboard as experience and move on. I'm at a pivotal time in my life doing the best I've ever done academically and personally. I'm well on my way to graduating from my master's with a potential PhD on the cards. I never once pictured myself doing anything like this. The only thing making me think twice is that I do want a family, wife and kids and all that eventually. I just don't know if I'd be missing out on an opportunity to help someone be better and maybe do well from it myself. OP, after reading your story, here are my thoughts on the situation. So she cheated on you numerous times while you were long distance, then lied about it, trickle-truthed, gaslit you about the reason, and now you're long distance again and are wondering what the future holds? She is going to cheat again. She likes the option of having you around but isn't loyal, honest, or respectful of your commitment. That's not a good choice for a partner in a same-city relationship. I'm not sure why you would waste your time with this. Stop with the long-distance nonsense. Just ghost her. No explanation needed. You don't owe her anything. Every second you invest in her is a complete waste of your time. Focus on your education. You will have plenty of time to find another woman that will be loyal and treat you right. Good luck, OP. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's stories. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel Relationship Haven. Before the video starts, please make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If there is a story you would like to share with me, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Now let's get into today's stories. Right now, it feels like my whole world is collapsing around me. I never thought I would find myself in this situation, but here I am. I, 42 male, have been dating my girlfriend, 40 female, for about a year and a half. In that time, we've had some rocky moments, but we've always managed to talk them out and come out stronger. Communication was always key, and I was led to believe that things were fine. Prior to the whole pandemic, we had made plans to finally move in together, and I was just waiting for my next paycheck to come so I could finally put a deposit down on a place where the two of us could make a new home. This past Saturday, I went to visit her to make sure she was doing okay. She recently lost her job, and to make sure that she was stocked up on groceries for the next few weeks because I didn't know when we would see each other again. Well, I didn't expect the day to turn out the way it did. Early in the afternoon, she ended up having a medical emergency. It was an incredibly scary and traumatic moment. I called the police and they immediately came out and we were en route to the hospital. In the whirlwind, I managed to grab her phone, thinking that I could call her parents to let them know what was going on. I got to the hospital and was told I would have to wait until she was stabilized. Alone in the waiting area, I opened her phone and searched for her parents' number. That's when I saw it. Text messages, pictures, and videos between her and her male friend. I don't know why, but I kept scrolling. A picture of a pregnancy test. Explicit pictures. Things I never would have imagined. They made exchanges referring to me, asking if I had left. I went back and looked at the other messages, dozens of them to dozens of different men. My heart sank. I was gutted. I am a decent enough person that I managed to stay at the hospital so I could see her. I went into the ER room where she was being held and saw her there, asleep on the hospital bed, unaware of all that I knew. Eventually, I looked at her and just broke down. I was so angry, hurt, and upset. It was bad enough that we were at the hospital, but this was a double punch to the gut. They admitted her overnight. Because of the pandemic, no visitors were allowed upstairs, so I had to leave. That was the last time I saw her. The next day, I called her on the phone. I told her everything. I said I knew about her and her friend. I said I knew about the others. I demanded answers. I got none. That was 5 days ago, and all week I have been walking around like a shell of the person I once was. I feel hurt and alone. I feel emasculated and betrayed. I have been talking with friends. I've been exercising. I've been doing everything I can to take my mind off of this. I actually felt a little better this afternoon, enough so that I actually could eat something. And then I got the text. Miss you. I love you. And now I'm back to where I started. I didn't reply. I don't know where to go from here. I just needed to write this down somewhere and get it out, because it just hurts so goddamn bad. How could someone who I had planned on spending the rest of my life with do these things? I keep looking back for signs, but I don't see any. Man, she got me good. I guess if there is any silver lining to this, it is that I found out about this now instead of after we moved in together. I just want the pain to stop. Update. Just wanted to give some quick updates to clarify what has happened since I posted this in the wee morning hours. First off, she is blocked on all social media and from my phone. However, I'm expecting to hear from her through other channels because this morning I also contacted AP's wife with all of the screenshots, information, and timelines that I had. No response yet, but I can certify that it was delivered. Hopefully I hear back. Thank you to everyone for your support and all the kind words. I have known from day one that this wasn't my fault. It wasn't the result of anything I had done, and that this is her problem. I am not going to analyze the relationship as much as I want to, because frankly, I cannot trust anything she ever said or did at this point. There is no chance of me falling for reconciliation because I'm firmly in the once a cheater, always a cheater camp. The proof is just too concrete. Also, I recently had an STI test and it was clear. It's been over a month since she and I were last physical. She said she was going through some medical issues, but now I can see that is all BS. Thank God for this community. I will keep you updated as I hear more from the AP's wife. Update 2. I have to say a huge thank you to every single person who has commented. The outpouring of support and confirmation that I'm doing the right thing has helped me a lot today. I'm so glad I decided to share. This definitely helped me feel a little better today. I know the days, weeks, and months ahead will be hard, but I'm ready. I'm still dealing with a lot of emotions, but what is it they say? Time heals all wounds. I think that's a fair assessment. I just want to appreciate all the advice, support, and love you've shown me today. I have not heard back from AP's wife at all. I contacted her through Facebook Messenger, and it looks as if the message has been seen. I also texted her, left a voicemail, and sent an email to the only email address of hers that I could find. I don't know if AP is in freak-out mode and trying to lock her down, but I'm not going to give up hope. She needs to know what her husband was up to. I haven't had any additional blowback, and my ex has not tried to reach out to me or anyone I know. At this point, I'm on my way to recovery. OP, don't waste any more of your life on her. Try to push her away from your mind over the coming weeks. Some people are terrible, and you'd never know it because they're so good at pretending to be something they're not. Try to do things you enjoy, try to move on, and know you didn't deserve to be treated like that. Don't be nice. Be free. Cut ties with her, have a funeral for her in your mind, and never speak to her again. She doesn't love you. She's just too afraid of rejection to show herself as the shallow, lying, attention-seeking animal she is. Now, let's get into today's second story. We started dating in September 2018 on my birthday, so that day has always been extra special to me. My partner does roster work. She works 8 days on a mine site and is back 6 days off. I work a decent 9-to-5 job, so we are both pretty well off. She's also an international resident, so I decided to help her get her visa to stay. We applied for the de facto/spouse visa at the end of 2020. For the first 3.5 years, our relationship was really good. We both loved each other and were doing so much together. Unfortunately, some clashes between her and my mom led to us moving out and renting a place for 6 months. She knew how to do everything. She's extremely independent, so she knew how to take care of a house and cooked really good food. I, on the other hand, was a bit of a dropkick and didn't know how to do any of that properly. My mom looked after me a bit too much, which handicapped me a lot when I moved out. Whilst I was working every day and being very smart with our money, we never had any money problems. I was also a bit selfish as a 23-year-old who tended to spend a bit too much time at the computer and away from household chores. I did make sure I spent some time with her though. We watched some good shows like Game of Thrones, Money Heist, and Merlin. I did, however, clean enough to ensure we got 100% of our bond money back. I did all the de-weeding by hand. After our 6-month lease was finally up, we bought a place together. This was around September 2021. She started her mining job around December 2021. And I, still being a dropkick, didn't do much of the housework. Although I did learn to cook some dishes as I needed to make sure I kept myself fed whilst she was on site. But I still didn't do the laundry or vacuum and mop the floor because my standard of cleanliness was so much different from hers. Instead, I spent my time learning how to invest because she told me she wanted to make a lot of money. I designed an investment plan just to suit her. I enjoyed investing a lot. Cleaning, not so much. Come April 2022, and she broke down in her bedroom at my lack of help around the house. She told me she was incredibly stressed with having me come back and do all the housework after 8 long days on the mine site. At that stage, I finally woke up and became the adult I should have become long ago. I started vacuuming and mopping the whole house once a fortnight and doing the laundry every week, making sure she had an empty basket to work with when she came back. It was like a switch was flicked on in my head. I should also mention that sex was non-existent in the last year of our relationship. She didn't want to take the pill due to side effects, although she was on it periodically for the first 3 years, and we had sex then. I went to buy a pack of condoms, but then she went and hid the condoms when we were about to have sex, so I just refused to have sex with her because I didn't want to have unprotected sex and risk pregnancy. She even suggested that I take the male version of the pill that would make my sperm infertile or something. I don't even know what she was on about there. I kept up my routine, making my own lunches and maintaining the house while she was away. I finally became an adult that could survive on my own, but the relationship didn't seem to improve. Slowly over time, she stopped cooking for me and didn't like me touching her in bed. She also gave me her cheek for kisses instead of her lips. Looking back, these were all red flags, but I was blinded by love and my desperation to save the relationship. I kept up with the cleaning and maintenance. She even went back on the pill to balance her hormones, or so she claimed. I tried initiating sex with her again at that point, but she refused, and then came September 17th, 2022. I was mopping the floor in my computer room and couldn't use it because the floor was wet. I went to use her laptop instead and saw everything in Messenger. She had been in a casual but intimate relationship with a man on the mine site, a little younger than me. The text messages were extremely explicit. I saw they had this going on since late July. I couldn't go any further back because I was about to throw up. I confronted her about it that night, and she told me she had been extremely stressed with work and had fallen out of love. I didn't understand. She loved me when I was a total dropkick. Then all of a sudden I became this mature and capable adult, but she didn't love me anymore. I was a total wreck for the next week and couldn't sleep well. I decided to call things off with her. I cannot be with someone who commits infidelity. We are going to split up our assets and go our separate ways. She told me she wants to remain friends, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, nor do I think that's a good idea for either of us. This also has implications for her visa. She is currently on her temporary visa until the end of November this year, at which point we were supposed to sign off on some documents so she could get her permanent residency. I told her I refused to sign any documentation as I basically would have to lie, which could get me sent to jail along with a big fine. She may still be able to get her permanent residency if the department decides to award it to her, but she is at a much greater risk of having to go back to a student visa, which means she will lose her mining job. Along with her life savings of having to enroll in some course she doesn't want to complete and pay international student fees, which are bloody expensive. Along with wasting years of her life just to progress her spouse visa all for nothing. Despite the harm she has inflicted on me, I hope she gets her permanent residency. It doesn't affect me either way whether she gets it or not, but at this stage I have no influence over it because I have already withdrawn as her sponsor. I cried multiple times in front of multiple people. I cried because the vision I had of us being together with our many successes around us is now impossible. I cried because I was forced to make decisions that would either harm myself while benefiting her or harm her while benefiting myself. I cried as I entered the empty and dark house after work was done, knowing that she was living with her friends and I was alone. I will be moving back to my parents in a few months. It makes no economic sense to stay out here on my own without a partner. This was an exit affair. By the time she began crying to you about your lack of effort, she had already checked out. She, unfortunately, chose the most immature way to do it. At least you can use this as your own learning experience and personal growth. You didn't deserve to be cheated on. She could have been honest at any time. It would be best if you get to no contact as quickly as possible. Be sad about her visa situation, but don't legally risk yourself. She knew the situation and its implications. That's on her. Her actions have consequences and she is finally feeling them. You need to look out for yourself first and foremost. And absolutely don't be her friend. You can't be friends with someone who traumatizes you in such a despicable way. Don't kick yourself too much. You were 20 years old when you entered into this relationship. You showed a great deal of maturity when you changed your behavior to help your partner and the relationship. Regardless, you have dodged a bullet and you will be better off without her. A young man who is capable of living on his own and who can cook and clean is a huge plus in the dating field. Enjoy being single. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. I hope you all have a great rest. I, 33 male, met my wife, 31 female, 8 years ago on a dating app. At the time, neither of us was looking for anything serious. We were both young and we wanted to make the best of our youth while we could. But then we fell for each other and all of that went out the window. We wanted to be with each other all the time and things quickly got serious. I knew before she and I even met that my wife was polyamorous. At the time, it wasn't something I cared much about. I just went into our relationship thinking it was going to be a casual, fun time. I was definitely curious about what that was and how that worked in her life. But personally, I've always been monogamous. My wife told me one day when things started to get serious that for the first time in years, she was only thinking about one person, and that was me. There was a bit of a disconnect between us when we first started exclusively dating because I felt like I was taking something away from her through monogamy. However, she assured me that it was what she wanted. We had some ups and downs, and we were able to work it out to be together. Eventually, I proposed to her and we got married. Some of the people in my family were not at all understanding of polyamory, and they were practically betting that I would end up getting divorced. Before I was with my wife, I didn't know much about it, and I might have thought the same thing. But she explained everything to me in such a way that I understood what it was, and I trusted that should she ever have any issues with monogamy that she would come to me and we could talk about them. About 3 years into our marriage, I got the opportunity of a lifetime for work. It required me to travel abroad for 3 months to do some on-site filming for an advertising agency. They were pretty much paying me to travel all over Asia and visit some of the best tourist sites and take pictures. All expenses paid, hotels, meals, airfare, everything you can think of. After a long discussion with my wife, we decided that it was too good of an opportunity to pass up, and I agreed to take it. Of course, that meant that she would be alone back home while I was away, except for 1 week when she would be meeting me in Tokyo since our schedules aligned. I said goodbye to her and I set off on my grand adventure. I had a great time. Every night I would FaceTime with my wife and we would catch up. I had no fears that anything was going to happen while I was away. One night, I called her for FaceTime around 5 p.m. While I was in Thailand, that was around 8 a.m. in our time zone. Our typical call schedule had been just like that. I would call her in the evening when I got finished with all of my things, and she was usually drinking coffee in the kitchen when I did. However, this time she didn't answer. At first, I figured that she must have slept late or forgotten to set her alarm, but deep down I knew that was not like her at all. She had always been the kind of person to wake up at 7 a.m. on the dot without even needing an alarm to do so. Still, I didn't suspect that she was with someone else. I just texted her and told her that I missed her and loved her, and I would give her a call the next morning since we would both be busy and or asleep. When I was finally able to get on the phone with her again, I asked her about what happened. It wasn't an accusatory question. It was more of curiosity since it just wasn't like her. She got defensive with her answer. She made it sound like I was insinuating something when I wasn't by any means. I ended the call before an argument started. That was the last thing I wanted while I was trying to enjoy myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her reaction that I didn't know about. Eventually, we made up and everything was fine leading up to her visiting me in Tokyo. She got off the plane and I was at the airport to pick her up. I was excited to see her. She was my wife and I loved her and I missed her. It had only been 2 weeks since I last saw her, but the first thing I wanted to do was just go back to the hotel room and be intimate with her. When we got there, she told me she wasn't in the mood because she was a little bit jet-lagged from the flight. I completely understood where she was coming from, so I didn't want to pressure her into doing anything. So we both just laid down and talked for a while. Throughout the rest of the week, every time I would try to initiate something with her, she would come up with a reason to reject it. Whenever she would end it, I wouldn't ask any questions or try to pressure her to give me answers about why she didn't want to sleep with me. It did strike me as odd because she has always been the type of person who was very eager to have intimacy. The Tokyo trip ended for her and I still had 1 week left on my journey. It flew by and I couldn't wait to get home because I could feel that there was some distance growing between my wife and me. Everything seemed normal when I got there, but she still wasn't wanting to sleep with me. After the first couple of days I was back, she started staying late at work and it honestly felt like she was actively avoiding me. At that point, I had let a lot of my insecurities about what was going on with our relationship pile up and I confronted her about it when she returned home. She told me that I was being obnoxious with my accusations. In fact, she ended up guilt-tripping me for why she was staying late at work. She told me it was because she had to take time off work to visit me in Tokyo as I pressured her to do. We got into a huge argument about that and I ended up sleeping on the couch. Just the following day, which happened to be a Saturday, She told me she had to go to work for some last-minute troubleshooting at the office. In all the time we had been together, she had never worked a Saturday. I think it was at that point that I really thought something was going on. All the time that we had been together, we had never had any issues with her polyamory, but as soon as I started to think that something was wrong, it popped its head right up. I couldn't help but wonder if she had taken advantage of the time that I was gone and slept with another person. For a while, I convinced myself that I was just exaggerating and purposefully trying to hurt my feelings by thinking things like that. I distracted myself by trying to clean up some of the house. As I was looking under our bed to pull out any old clothes or trash, etc., I found a sock. It was only one sock, but it wasn't mine, I knew that, and it wasn't the type of sock that my wife wore. It was someone else's sock who didn't live in my house. That was the push that I needed to seriously consider that my wife was in fact cheating on me. I went to her office and looked through her desktop to see if there were any indications of who it was with or what she was doing while she was supposedly at work. There was no indication from any of her recent emails that she needed to go into the office for any reason, so that helped me realize that she had already lied to me. Her inbox seemed clean, but when I looked over her desktop and clicked on her recycle bin, I found some pictures and videos that she had deleted but hadn't cleared. My heart completely sank when I saw that. I recognized the man in the pictures right away. He was one of her coworkers. I had met him a few times at company gatherings, and I always thought he was a bit chummy with my wife. I would make jokes about it with her, and she would just laugh it off with me and tell me that he was married too, so I had nothing to worry about. I guess they both saw a prime opportunity to cheat on their partners while I was out of town. I emailed myself the evidence and immediately began looking for a divorce attorney. Right away, I started thinking of a way to get back at both of them for their betrayal. Knowing that my wife was cheating on me with one thing, but the fact that she was cheating on me with a married man and ruining 2 relationships knowingly was like a slap in the face. I looked her coworker up on social media and found his wife pretty easily. I sent her a message asking if we could set up a time to speak face to face since I had some news to share about her husband. She probably assumed the worst right away, but she agreed to meet me at a cafe. I saw her world crumbling when I told her, and I felt terrible. I felt the exact same way. I didn't want to let either of them just get away with their affair when they ruined both of our lives. I needed to come up with some way to get back at them. I spent the next few weeks pretending like everything was all right with my wife, and I encouraged the partner of her coworker to do the same. We both planned on leaving our spouses, but we wanted to get everything in order first. Both of us were going to surprise them with our divorce papers on the same day, so neither of them would have time to prepare. When everything was done, I brought my wife out to a lovely restaurant. She thought I was surprising her with a nice date. Toward the end of the meal, she asked me what prompted the gesture, so I figured I might as well tell her. I pulled out the papers and slid them across the table to her. She was shocked and hysterical. She tried to contain herself, but really it was quite the scene. Other diners were watching us while she started crying. I explained why and told her I saw the pictures and I wasn't going to be with a cheater. She tried to tell me I was misinterpreting them and that she hadn't cheated, but I didn't believe it. I just left the restaurant, leaving her to pick up the bill. We got divorced and now we're living separately and have no contact with each other at all. Funnily enough, her coworker's wife actually messaged me one day and asked to get together. We kind of hit it off. Things are still complicated because the wounds are so fresh, but there could be something there. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. It isn't unheard of for a polyamorous person to agree to monogamy when they fall for a certain person, but not everyone adjusts to that lifestyle. If she was so quick to take advantage of the opportunity when you were out of town, it makes me wonder if it was the first time or not. You did the right thing by telling the affair partner's spouse. She had the right to know that her husband was cheating as well. I'm glad you feel like you're building another connection with someone, but I would be careful not to jump into something else so fast. Especially with someone who just went through the same thing, you could form some kind of trauma bond and that would be toxic. Now, let's move on to our next story. When I, 27 male, met my fiancée, 25 female, 4 years ago, I knew right away that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She was everything that I had been looking for. We'd only been dating for a year when I proposed. We've been engaged for 3 years. The long engagement has caused some trouble for us. One of the biggest issues is that she wanted to plan her dream wedding, which subsequently would cost us quite a bit of money. I've never been one to care about superficial things like that. I would be more than happy going to the courthouse, signing some papers, then spending all of the wedding money on our honeymoon. However, she had always dreamt of her big day and she wanted a big wedding with no compromise. It felt like every other week the budget we set aside for the wedding had increased, or she was telling me that she had gone over and was apologizing for it. At some point, I noticed that her apologies were meaningless because she continued to go over. We were getting into a lot of arguments and there was a bit of resentment brewing between us. I'd had enough of her constant disregard for the financial constraints of the wedding, so I sat her down intending to have a calm, reasonable conversation with her. She was immediately very defensive and told me that she wasn't sure if she could be with someone who was controlling. I was upset that she had accused me of being controlling when all I was doing was standing up for myself when she was taking advantage of me. After the fight, she ended up leaving and staying at her friend's house for a week while we figured things out. Honestly, I thought it might have been the end for us. I was heartbroken. She was my dream girl and I cared so much about her. She eventually came back and we had a long discussion about the wedding. We both agreed that we still wanted to be together, but we needed to set some boundaries. We also agreed that we would move forward with what we had for the wedding and halt all further planning. That was the only compromise on the issue I would allow, since we were already over budget by 50% and had 150 people invited. We fell back into our old patterns with each other, and it seemed like our temporary break and discussion actually helped our relationship. The wedding was only a few months away and we were doing well. As we got closer to the wedding date, some of the stressors started to come back for us. My fiancé's coping mechanism with the stress was to throw herself into her work. She's a graphic designer and very creatively inclined, so it helped alleviate the stress. So instead of being home with me, she was at work. She started spending more and more time at work. Felt avoided, which was unlike her. I was curious about why she was there so much, so I asked her one night when she came home. She just told me that it was a good way to escape and forget about all of it. I didn't understand why she still wanted to go through with the huge wedding, if it was stressing her out so much, but I didn't ask about that. Around the same time, I noticed that she was wearing more makeup and more revealing clothes to work. I had nothing against her dressing in a way that she felt confident, but she normally wore long pants, boots, and sweaters to work because she was always complaining about how cold she was while she was there. Suddenly, she was wearing sleeveless blouses, showing cleavage, and skirts. It was odd. I tried not to worry about it, but honestly, I've seen a ton of those Am I the Jerk videos and stories exposing cheaters, so a lot of the things she was doing were raising red flags for me. I needed to find out if something was going on before the wedding. I didn't want to be married to her and then find out she was with an ex or something after we were legally attached. I did some snooping on my own, but didn't find anything. One thing I've always known about liars is that they're good at hiding their lies. So I justified hiring a private investigator to follow her. I reached out to someone who specializes in infidelity, and they agreed to take the case. I could only afford to pay them for a few days because the wedding was depleting a lot of my savings. The first day, they didn't find anything. She went to work and went home with no issue. I thought that maybe I was overreacting, but my gut told me not to call the private investigator off. The next day, I was glad I trusted my gut. My fiancée texted me about midway through the day that she would be staying late at the office. She said that she was helping a coworker with some excess work they had before a due date. However, the evidence the private investigator brought back to me told a different story. They emailed me over a file with videos and pictures of my girlfriend with her boss in his office. They were having sex right on his desk, while other employees were in the office. I just remember staring at the computer screen until it turned itself off. I was so shocked by what I saw. When I collected myself, I started to think about my options. There was absolutely no chance I was going through with the wedding, but I needed to figure out how it ended. I wanted a little revenge on her for cheating on me. An idea hit me, so before I acted on it, I packed up some of my stuff and texted my brother to see if I could stay with him. When I got to his house, I drafted an email to our entire wedding guest list. In the email, I told them all it was canceled and attached the evidence of my fiancé's affair. Surprisingly, I got several responses back from relatives, coworkers, and friends about it. What surprised me the most, which I didn't even realize at the time, was that my fiancé's HR manager was on the list. She reached out to me and asked about details because it was something she was obligated to act on because it was clearly on company property. I told her everything I knew. My fiancé figured out I was with my brother and came to his house, banging on the door. She was fuming at me, but I stood my ground and ended it. I told her I was contacting the venue, vendors, and everyone else involved in the wedding and having all of my money refunded to me. I felt bad when she was crying in front of me, but then I remembered how she cheated on me and I didn't anymore. She and her boss were both fired for their inappropriate relations on the job. She tried to call me and tell me that I was still obligated to pay for the apartment even though I didn't live there, but I managed to work something out with the apartment complex to pay for 1 month and get off the lease. I think they were just willing to work with me because of the situation. My now ex-fiancée was forced to move out because she lost her job and couldn't afford rent on her own because she dumped what little she had in savings into a wedding that never happened. OP, I'm sorry you had to go through something like that. It sounds like your ex was manipulating you from the start when she wasn't respecting your budget for the wedding. I'm not saying you were wrong for following your heart and proposing so early, but it's usually best to spend some time with someone before proposing to avoid situations like that. People tend to hide the less desirable qualities of themselves early on. I'm glad you were able to get out of the relationship and your lease so you didn't end up marrying her. You saved yourself a lot of stress by avoiding the inevitable divorce. I wish you the best moving forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.